The story opens with two continents drifting apart, not in geography, but in direction. In the United States, the farming heartland feels heavier than it has in decades. Trade disputes have sent fertilizer costs climbing beyond reason, rising interest rates squeeze family farms that once stood strong for generations, and thousands of American growers quietly admit they are now living from loan to loan, not harvest to harvest. In Washington, analysts warn that the world is entering the most uncertain agricultural decade since the 1970s. While America struggles to steady its footing, a completely different current is gaining strength across Africa. Far away in West Africa, in a country rarely mentioned in Western evening news, something historic begins to unfold. Burkina Faso, led by a leadership intent on breaking old patterns, announces a sweeping prohibition on $780 million worth of imported Western hybrid F1 seeds. A decision aimed squarely at the seed giants of the United States and the European Union. No one in Brussels or Washington expected a small Sahel nation to make a move this bold. Within hours, European headlines warn of possible trade rifts. Agricultural lobby groups call the decision dangerous. Western officials whisper the fear they had never imagined speaking aloud. What if other African nations follow? But inside Burkina Faso, the atmosphere is not fear, it is renewal. On the dusty outskirts of Ouagadougou, a farmer lifts a wooden bowl filled with traditional millet seeds. This is the first time in many years we plant our ancestors' seed, he says proudly. Around him, younger farmers lean in, listening to forgotten stories, tales of seeds that endured droughts, conflict, and centuries of hardship long before any foreign company arrived with glossy brochures and patented crops. The world sees a seed ban, Burkina Faso sees a return to dignity, and before we go further, let me ask you, if you were a farmer, in the US, in Africa, or anywhere on Earth, how would this choice affect your view of Burkina Faso? Because what happens next will challenge more than markets. It will challenge the very idea of who controls the future of food. Why does one African nation banning a seed shake the balance of agricultural power? The decision that rattled global agriculture began quietly in a long, narrow government hall in Ouagadougou. No foreign consultants. No corporate suits. No glossy PowerPoints, just rows of Burkina farmers, their hands rough and worn, waiting for a decision whispered about for months. On that morning, the Minister of Agriculture signed the order. All hybrid F1 seed imports from the US and EU, suspended immediately. Local radio stations interrupted their music to deliver the news. By noon, it reached Washington, Paris, Brussels. By evening, analysts called it the boldest agricultural sovereignty move in modern African history. To understand why, you must understand what Burkina Faso rejected. For over a decade, Western hybrid seeds dominated the nation's farms. They produced high yields at first, but farmers could not replant them. Prices rose every year. The seeds required imported fertilizers whose costs kept climbing, and each planting season deepened dependence on foreign patents. To many farmers, planting stopped feeling like renewal, and began feeling like surrender. One farmer, Yakuber, put it perfectly as he stood beside his sunburned sorghum field. When the drought came, the hybrid died first. It burned fast. But our seed, it held on. That one remembers the land, the other forgets. Thousands across the country echoed the same truth. Hybrid seeds had given yield, but taken independence. Western institutions responded immediately. US seed groups called the ban economically reckless. EU officials spoke of WTO violations. Economists predicted instability. Corporate lobbyists warned that Africa might follow Burkina's example. And that fear was not unfounded. For months, Burkina Faso had quietly built national seed banks, trained cooperatives in seed preservation, distributed drought-resistant native varieties, tested traditional seed performance across multiple regions. This was not a protest, this was a planned divorce. a structural break from dependency. Across Africa, the reaction was electric. Radio stations discussed native seed resilience, West African farmer unions applauded the decision, crowds in Mali offered symbolic baskets of millet in solidarity, social media across the continent erupted with slogans, seed freedom, no more dependency. Agricultural students filmed tutorials on preserving indigenous crops, elders were invited to teach forgotten methods. A sense of identity, long buried, was rising again, but the pressure was just beginning. In Europe, officials discussed filing a WTO complaint. In Washington, advisors warned that Burkina had made a strategic error. Corporate analysts spoke of billions in lost future profits if Africa followed suit, because the truth was clear: if Africa stops depending on Western seed companies, the foundation of global agribusiness shakes. And at the center of this wave stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré. His message was simple: if the seed belongs to another, the harvest belongs to him too. His words traveled across the continent, quoted, replayed, celebrated. As the ban settled into daily life, change swept through Burkina Faso. Seed shops replaced imported packets with bowls of local grains. Communities held night meetings to choose which ancestral seeds to revive. Farmers relearned forgotten techniques, seed drying, soil rituals, communal storage. For decades, the farming rhythm was set by shipments from the West. Now, it was set by the land again. Transition was not perfect. Some regions faced short-term yield drops, but the sense of ownership was stronger than it had been in years. Politically, Burkina Faso rose to regional prominence. Mali and Niger applauded the decision. Ghana requested technical studies. Tanzania began re-evaluating its own seed banks. For once, Africa was shaping the agricultural conversation, not waiting to be instructed. Even in America, farmers watched with mixed emotions, forums filled with comments like, "They did what we wish we could. Corporate seeds own us. They own nothing." The symbolism was powerful: African farmers breaking dependency, while Western farmers felt trapped in it. And so, the story of Burkina Faso is not only about agriculture. It is about memory. Identity. Freedom. It is about a continent remembering that its soil carried life long before foreign patents existed. Across villages, elders whisper prayers over the fields, farmers greet the earth like an old friend. Children watch their parents plant seeds that come not from companies, but from generations before them. A continent once pushed toward uniformity is rediscovering the strength of its diversity, and around the world, from Brazil to Vietnam, from France to the United States, farmers watch with curiosity and respect, because this story is not about Africa alone. It is about freedom, the kind every farmer understands, and revolutions often begin in small places, with simple acts, carried by people who refuse to bend.